Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Allen. Earlier in the year, I wanted to take you on a journey through the political process of a party and share with you the experience of a political convention. Well, the Conservative Party of Canada is heading into its biannual policy convention this weekend. Although it will be quite different than the ones I've attended previously. It will be virtual because of, take a guess, COVID. So what is the point of a political convention? What will the members who attend, the delegates, hope to achieve or see come out of this large virtual gathering? And why does it matter to you, our viewer? Well, joining me to share their insights into what they expect to see happen at this policy convention is Dean Allison, Conservative MP from Niagara West and host of The Hill Update here on the News Forum. And Tony Clement, former Conservative cabinet minister under the Harper government and host of Boom and Bust, also here on the News Forum. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm so glad that all three of us can be together, yet still apart here at the News Forum. This is going to be a fun show.
For sure.
Okay, so, maybe we'll start with you, Tony. You're a political veteran. You've been to many conventions. And before we got started here, we were chatting about how you were actually one of the key glue that kind of brought the two parties together when there was a split, if for lack of a better term. Do you want to share a little bit about the history of the party, the Conservative Party of Canada, in the last 20 years?
Well, certainly there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen for that. I was one of them. I was the founding president of the Canadian Alliance, which was the first attempt to bring the two parties together. It had limited success, but it did pave the way eventually for the eventual reuniting of the parties. And certainly there was, at the time, it was an open question whether it would ever happen. And one of the reasons it had to happen was because it was very clear, election after election, that a divided Conservative Party in different camps could not overturn a Liberal majority in Parliament. So after a while, I think people got desperate enough that they wanted to see a change of government, that they buried the hatchet and the new United Conservative Party of Canada was formed.
Right. And I do remember a little bit of the climate at the time because I was sort of just getting involved in politics in the 90s. And I remember that the Reform Party sort of grew out of this, the West wants in kind of sentiment. And I guess they felt that their views or their interests were not being properly represented in Ottawa. Do you see a similarity here right now, Tony, with a lot of concerns about, the cancellation of Line 5, not enough support federally with various pipeline projects? What do you see that might parallel?
Well, certainly the current Liberal government is walking in the footsteps of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Back in those days, it was the National Energy Policy and as Preston Manning said on my show recently, it was also the Mulroney government, unfortunately, which chose a Quebec site to build CF-18s rather than the Winnipeg, Manitoba site. So there was a lot of Western grievances at the time, is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And I would say that the Trudeau government is not showing much love to the economic aspirations of the prairie provinces in particular. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of grumbling and grievance. There's a referendum on equalization planned for the fall in Alberta that could tear at what the glue of the federation, if you will. So I think that you're going to see some of that rhetoric at the convention. Absolutely. Now,
Dean, let's get to you. You were elected with the first wave, if you will, under the new party banner, the Conservative Party of Canada. That was 16 years ago, well, actually almost 17 years ago now. How has the party changed since, I guess, its rebirth, if you will, in 2004 till now?
Well, I think, being in power. So we started in 2004 in opposition as a minority. Then we got to be in government as a minority government in 6 and 8. And I think, we saw some great governance under Stephen Harper and Tony was in cabinet. So he was a part of that as well. And I think the party really gelled. It's tough when you have a big tent to have everyone all together and to make sure that they're all rowing in the same way. It's tough because there's social conservatives, there's fiscal conservatives, there's red Tory, the list goes on. And so I think Stephen Harper did a great job making that happen. And that's always a delicate balance, in my opinion, from what I can see on the ground.
Yeah, I remember those days of frequent elections back in the mid to late 90s, or mid to late 2000s rather. You mentioned that there are a lot of different, I wouldn't say, I'm going to say the word factions, it's not the right word, but factions within the party. And it's quite the task for a leader or for the party executive to really kind of keep everybody under that big tent. And you mentioned a few in the Conservative Party of Canada. Well, we're going to delve into what those factions are and how that tent is looking right when we return from this commercial break. Welcome back. We're discussing the upcoming Conservative Party convention. It's happening virtually. And I've got two of my colleagues here to join in on this discussion. Member of Parliament Dean Allison and former Member of Parliament and former Cabinet Minister, the Honourable Tony Clement. Thank you, gentlemen, both for joining in. Okay, before the commercial break, Dean, you and I were chatting about the big tent that is the Conservative Party. Now, I don't hear the Liberal Party mention their big tent and all these groups. Why do we always use that term?
Well, that's a good question. I think at the end of the day, if you look at how Trudeau was managed, he's certainly gone over into NDP territory and some of the policies that he's been able to deal with. And, when we talk about a right of center party, there's a whole range of people. I mean, all the way from, minimal government, libertarian, all the way as we get towards the center and more of a progressive, the fact remains that we need to take care of people. There's fiscal conservatives and the list goes on. So I think there's by nature just a larger group because it's, on the left, you've got, I don't want to call them socialists, but the NDP have socialist policies for sure. And, when you look at that, there just seems to be a lot more things that we are able to discuss, in my opinion, when you get just right of center.
Okay. And Tony, so before the commercial, obviously, Dean rattled off a few. The red Tories, and a lot of these are insider baseball terms, but red Tories, which I guess you could suggest are kind of left of center conservatives, social conservative, fiscal conservatives, I don't know, social progressives. I mean, their list could go on and on. How do you see each of these camps fitting into this policy convention this weekend?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I'd say is that our differences within our party are a lot less than the things that we agree on. I'd like to make that point pretty clear. We all believe in free markets. We all believe in individual choice and individual responsibility. So I think those are the markings of a Canadian conservative in the 21st century. At the policy convention, there was a lot of talk in the media about how there was going to be these huge battles. I actually don't see that. When you actually look at the policy resolutions that actually made their way through the policy resolution approval process, and you said at the outset of the show, Tanya, there is a process here, and you have to get a certain number of riding associations, EDAs, to agree to something getting on the floor, whether it's a constitutional amendment or a policy amendment. And so the ones that have made it through, I think there will be some discussion and debate, but they're not existential, in my view. I think, reasonable people can differ on them. There might be a slight change of wording here and there, but they're not huge battle royales that I've seen at previous conventions.
And I mean, that's a very good point. I think only 34 policies actually made it through that process. Previously in conventions, when we gather in person, and I love in-person conventions, it's so much fun, but that'll be for another year, clearly. We usually have, upward, like about 80, 100 policies go through. Then we have breakout sessions and we kind of hash things out. And then only a select few obviously advance to the convention floor. There were no breakout sessions in this convention. So only a select few got to go through this virtual process. There are a lot of people, and I come from, I guess you could say, the social conservative wing of the party, or some people would brand me as such. A lot of people are disgruntled, saying that, not enough policies went through. This convention, perhaps more than an in-person one, it's actually easier to vote. So why not let more policies through? Do you have any comments, Dean?
Well, I think, once again, we talk about the process, and it's never easy. This is the first time we're doing it virtually, so I'm sure there'll be some growing pains as they try and figure that all out. Literally, there's hundreds of resolutions, whether it's policy or constitutional amendments, and every riding or EDA gets a chance to vote on those ones. And so the reality is we could talk about thousands of policy things, and we may not get anything done. And we have a limited amount of time. We don't have an infinite amount of time. And so I think they've done what they think they can handle. And up front, all EDAs or riding associations got to vote on what their priorities are. And as a result of that, that's what moved forward. So I think it's very democratic. And maybe, when people are complaining on both sides, maybe you struck the right balance, right? Saying that, not everyone got what they want. But at the same time, like Tony says, the things we agree on are always greater than the things that separate us.
Okay, and Tony, we have 45 seconds before commercial. Why are policy processes important? Like, where does this end within a party? Will this actually become, the thing that the party leader runs on?
Well, absolutely. What happens after all of this is they become whatever is passed becomes the policy of the party. But there's another layer of process whereby the leadership, the caucus, the campaign team decide whether that would be put in the storefront window for the next elections, because the leader is going to have his. Aaron O'Toole is going to have his points of view. The caucus are going to have their points of view. So this is part of the process. It's not the entire process, but it adds some depth to the possible policy resolution.
Okay, we're going to pick up this discussion right when we return from this commercial break. Joining me once more are my colleagues, Dean Allison and Tony Clement, who each have their respective shows here on the News Forum. So, gentlemen, just before the break, we were discussing what policies sort of made it and didn't make it. Kind of to wrap that up, I was sort of surprised, though, not one social conservative policy seemed to have made it through that process. Given that over 35% of the party on first ballot voted for one of two social conservative candidates, that seems surprising to me. 1/3 of the party seems to be leaning social conservative, but not one policy. Do you have any thoughts on that, Tony?
Yeah, there was a pretty high bar that a policy had to attain in terms of support from various EDAs in various parts of the country in order to get it finally onto the convention floor this week. So I think that might have been part of the problem. I do know that various EDAs that wanted their resolutions to be presented, there was some horse trading going on.
Yes.
I don't know if you were aware of that, but EDAs that were presenting a particular policy resolution would say to other EDAs, we'll support your policy resolution if you support our policy resolution. So it was a kind of a horse trading environment that might have had an impact as well. So I think, as Dean has said, we have what we have, and there will be robust policy discussion. I read through the policy discussions. I certainly people of differing views when it comes to social issues. There will be places where they might want to put their chips on the table to discuss those things. So I don't think it's going to go away.
Okay, and now one other major thing that will happen at this policy convention, because it happens every 2 years, is the party gets to elect its governing body, its executive, what we call as Conservatives our National Council. And there's going to be a high turnover this time, and a lot of seats are up for grabs. All three of us, I think, live in Ontario, so there are 4 seats or 4 representatives that we get to send to National Council. There are, I believe, 9 running for those 4, so it seems like it's going to be quite competitive. Will any of these new national councils elected coast to coast, do you think that'll kind of shift the way things are done? Will there be more accountability to the membership? Because I know there's been a lot of complaints that perhaps the previous national council didn't respect the members' voice all that much. Dean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think a couple things. People will be running on those things. It'll be tougher, obviously, to get your vote out because normally you're working the back rooms of the conventions and trying to get people a chance. And so as people put forward their policies and they're talking about what they'd like to represent, that'll maybe give a good indication of where people are at. I mean, any board that we've ever been on, I think all of us have sat on volunteer boards. It's always difficult for one person to be able to manage. You've got to deal with the team and the approach is there. So I think if that is the flavor going into it, we'll see which people get elected on the council, and then that'll go from there.
Yeah, and one thing that I love, and again, I'm a card-carrying member of the Conservative Party, sat on boards like I'm sure you both have, although not held office like you two. But one thing that I do like about our party is that we do have that one member, one voice, one member, one vote, and I do enjoy that. And the other thing I do is that there is this overarching principle that we respect our grassroots members, and truly anybody who wants to run should be able to run, and we generally don't like the parachuting of candidates. Although I know personally there have been some candidates who've been quashed, and sometimes the reasons I don't think have been justifiable enough because usually the reason isn't even given, but you hear backroom chatter. Does it not erode democracy when we have a national council which is going to be eliminating candidates? And I know they have to vet them, but sometimes I think that there's almost an overstepping. Let the members decide at the local level. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I think it's a fine balance, Tanya. I think you raised some legitimate concerns there, and there are candidates for national council who are also articulating that concern that the too much top-down control is not a good thing. And at the same time, I think our members realize that the leader should have a little bit of sway over certain decisions, but it's important to have that balance. So you're going to see that play out in the National Council elections. And really, when you look at it, the Conservative Party of Canada, we're the most open party when it comes to nominations, when it comes to different ridings and EDAs having different points of view. You look at the top-down approach, the near Stalinist approach, if I dare say so, of the Liberal Party of Canada. We're definitely on the other side of, and if there are certain things that the members don't like, fair enough. But when you look at it, basically in comparison to what the others are doing, we're pretty freewheeling.
Yeah, that's a good point. Dean, we 10 seconds left. Any final thoughts as we head into this convention weekend?
Yeah, no, I just one quick thought on that. It's usually when people prepare for a nomination and then the leader inserts himself at the last moment that really makes people angry. So to Tony's point, it's a leader's prerogative, but you must declare that stuff up front so people don't waste time and money and effort.
That's a good point. Okay, thank you both so much for joining me, and perhaps we'll see you this weekend virtually. Welcome back. We're discussing the upcoming virtual federal Conservative Party of Canada convention that's happening. It's a policy convention, and it's happening this weekend. Whether you're a delegate, you're an observer, or perhaps you're just a layperson who doesn't know exactly what's going on, well, I want to tell you one of the more interesting things that happen at a convention is to observe who's organizing what. And tonight, we're going to be speaking to just one of those organizers, Dr. Teresa Pierre, President of Parents as First Educators. So, Dr. Teresa Pierre, first of all, thank you for joining me. You have had boots on the ground and you've been rolling up your sleeves and organizing for this convention, this policy convention. Why? Explain to our viewers, why would you get involved in something like this?
Well, we thought that we saw a good opportunity here, just as we had back in 2018 when we got involved in the Ontario PC convention. And at that convention, we had hundreds of people participating. And to the extent that some of the resolutions that we were supporting got 80% support in the room. Wow. So it was really great. And we have recruited hundreds and more this time around. So we're off to a good start. But the larger question, I think, is probably what you're asking, like, why, what's the motive? So right. You're just your parent group, well, we're concerned about our kids. We're concerned about the culture. If Justin Trudeau has his way, there's very serious consequences that are going to be paid on future generations. And we really want to reorient things, bring the culture in a different direction. And that's why we're doing it.
Okay, very interesting. So what specifically do you feel can be accomplished at this convention? Do you feel that the party has room to adopt some policies that maybe you put forward, or what's going on with that?
Well, there are three types of things that go on at a convention, and one of them is policy, and it's called a policy convention. As well, they pass constitutional amendments, which govern how the party is governed. And lastly, they elect part of the administrative structure of the party, the people that are called national councillors. So we are trying to have an impact in all of these areas. When the party was considering different policy resolutions, we threw our support behind a number of them. And many of them, unfortunately, didn't make it through to the policy convention. And unaccountably, instead of the 100 or so policies that appeared in the plenary meetings at past conventions, there are only 34 going on to this convention. Right. And people are not too happy about that, all of the work that went on to support these resolutions. There are some that are interesting, and we have our eye on, for instance, a policy to promote freedom of speech on campus. It would provide financial incentives to universities that subscribe to the Chicago principles. And if you're not familiar with that, they are principles that govern freedom of speech, freedom of expression.
Okay.
So that's one example. As well, in the constitutional amendment arena, we have some that we're looking at as well. So, for instance, there's going to be a proposed change of wording to support progressive social policy, and instead of the what's there now, which says a compassionate social policy. So we don't really want to be turning the clock back to the days of the 1993 and progressivism. So we're going to be keeping our eye on that. What our hope is that some of these maneuvers that seem to have taken place with the compression of the number of policies, and some as well, some maybe possible prevention of constitutional amendments coming forward, we are going to be supporting the national councillors who are really speaking out about their commitment to fair play and good governance.
Right.
And so we're supporting different national councillors from right across the country.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but good luck with your efforts at this convention, and I guess we'll see you there virtually.
Okay, thanks, Tanya.
Thank you. Well, the reason I covered this topic is because political conventions do matter. Some of the policies passed at this convention will actually become part of the leader's platform, and with an election looming just around the corner and perhaps a new change in prime minister, well, that policy could eventually become law. So we're going to keep our eye on this and maybe have a follow-up show as to what happened at the convention. For Counterpoint, I'm Tanya Granick-Allen.